Invincible is not a new, groundbreaking show. The gritty, more realistic take on superheroes is not the scathing, shocking deconstruction it once was. In fact, Invincible isn't even the only dark superhero parody on Amazon, with shows like The Boys and Kick-Ass being widely available. But what it lacks in a sense of originality, it makes up for in a sense of modernization. However, I do want to make this clear because shows like The Boys is on my watch list, but it isn't actually a show I've watched yet, so maybe it's gonna do the same things I'm about to praise Invincible for, but I don't really cover live action TV on this channel. I cover cartoons and animes, which are also cartoons, but if you call them that, everyone gets all pissy. But let's start off by giving this show a little bit of a detail, a little bit of an overview of what Invincible is about. It's a pretty obvious parody of the Justice League, or at least the setup is pretty obviously parodying the Justice League, down to the archetypes of the heroes, to their powers. The Superman hero claims to be a savior though from another world, come down to Earth to save it. This isn't exactly a new concept, and honestly this might be a bit of a spoiler, but I haven't seen any more episodes than you guys because it's only up to episode 4, so this is all just my own conjecture. It's not really anything that I'm pulling outside information for, so if you don't want to hear that, that's fine. But honestly, it seems pretty transparent that the race that he's claiming to be part of either A, doesn't exist, or B, is probably not as benevolent as they make themselves out to seem. Most likely, this super powerful race of ultra humans or ultra meta beings are just there to probably conquer other worlds, and they do it under the guise of saving them. But that transparent story plot aside, for some reason this guy snaps, killing the entire pseudo Justice League at once after luring them into an emergency meeting. After a fight scene that I can only imagine took about 70% of the animation budget, he kills them all in horribly gruesome graphic detail that I am surprised wasn't age restricted on YouTube. The whole show seems to center on the mystery of why he did it. We as the audience know he did it, and that usually takes away some of the fun, but most of the smarter characters come to that same conclusion pretty quickly. All the world's strongest heroes killed at once in one room, called by a beacon that only some of them can set up, and the strongest guy survives with heavy damage that they haven't ever seen him take before, and his claim is that when he got there, all the action was already done, and the lights went off, and he got jumped. The strongest guy in the world got jumped when the lights went off so badly that he was put into a coma. And then this guy just walked away, didn't even bother to finish the fight, didn't bother to kill the strongest guy despite like heavily wounding him. It's a pretty transparent and shitty story for a cover-up. And even the wife, who's like this Lois Lane type detective person, but she's not actually a detective, she's a real estate person, she's just savvy, she's just smart. She starts to realize that this story itself sounded like bullshit. But the story overall, despite being so transparent, at least to me, or at least I think I understand where the story is going, is still enjoyable. It's still somewhat of a coming of age story, focusing on his son getting his abilities, his superpowers. And despite the fact that this is literally some good looking kid who has this wealthy family, this incredible power and powerful dad, and he's got all these amazing gifts, I don't feel like a disconnect between connecting to him. Even though he has all of these meta powers, even though he has these meta issues, he still comes across as a normal teenager trying to juggle his social life, trying to juggle, you know, his relationships with his family, his friends, his love interest, all while tangling that up into a superhero drama. One of the easiest things to do is to make your superhero non-relatable. There is a fine line between disassociation from reality for the sake of enjoying material, be that a superhero comic where someone can just break all the rules of nature, and then having it also be divorced from social reality as in how people relate to one another and interact with one another. You can put off a lot of things in your mind, from world bending feats and just math that doesn't make any sense, but one of the things that often strikes out to people is strange social relationships. People speak a certain way, people act a certain way, and while we may not be able to put in the words how or why people do certain things, we know when people are acting weird. And so it's really easy to make these larger than life characters not exactly be realistic in a social sense, but this character comes across as genuine, as relatable, as someone who is, despite being this super powerful person, completely still vulnerable by making them very unsure of themselves, by making them wanting to impress their father, to try to live up to their father, to not be able to understand how to use their powers. And one of the great parts about the show is the fact that they're not just giving Superman-like powers. In fact, it's brought up, they still need to train. Flying is like a muscle. To get faster and faster, you have to keep on stretching it. You have to keep on working out. You have to stay to this dedicated routine. He has to learn how to punch. He has to learn how angular momentum works, how physics works, different things that come into play. He's not just given these godlike powers, so despite the fact that he has powers, he still has to go through a struggle to figure out how to use them. And while we may not be figuring out how to punch through the sound barrier, we have other problems in our life that we can extrapolate onto this, and it still makes him grounded despite being literally ungrounded by his powers. But speaking of the powers and the flying and the punching, the animation isn't actually nearly as bad as some people have made it out to be. While I was in Discord, someone had actually shown me the fight scene between the heroes, and that's what actually got me to look up this show. I've been meaning to, but I had never really had that final push. And one of the things that he warned me about was the fact that the animation is kind of meh, it's kind of hit or miss. But honestly, in this show, the animation is pretty fluid during combat scenes. Now, there is some stilted walking. There's some issues with characters seeming to be walking at different paces than they're being animated moving at. And there's some issues with non-fighting scenes. There's a clear deviation of the budget for this show. Background elements take least priority, non-fight scenes take second least, and the fight scenes take the most priority. And that makes sense. This is a probably semi-budget show. With as much advertisement as they've been giving it, I wouldn't be surprised if it actually had a pretty decent budget, all things considered. But it's still a budget-like show, and so for being a budget online-only show, which might not even have any merchandise come out of it, certainly hasn't yet, and it's free for all Prime members, and most people using Amazon, at least from my experience, probably have Prime in some form or another. They're not exactly making oodles and oodles amount of monies directly from the show. So the limited budget that they probably have is actually utilized pretty well. 3D elements are put into the background, as we see with a lot of 2D animation, because it saves so much time, and 3D elements are used pretty readily, but they're not distracting. They're still in line with the stylistic choices of the 2D elements, and it melds well enough that it's not something that's going to take me out of the world. There have been some moments when I've noticed 3D elements and I'm like, yeah, that would be too hard to probably animate, or be too costly, or take too much time, but that's because I'm not looking at it like a normie. And one of the things that you have to do when you're analyzing media is remember who the target audience is for. This isn't for YouTubers who spend way too much time watching animes and cartoons. This is targeted towards teens and young adults who just want to watch something to get like over their day, or to have something to fill a vacant spot. This isn't someone who's going to critically comb over every single frame with a fine-tooth pick or anything like that. It is someone who just wants to have fun and see an interesting story. However, talking about the average person, you can't divorce the average person from current political social climates. There is an underbelly of leftist ideology that seeks through this animation, as most media is left-leaning. Now, I have absolutely no issue with this, and I actually found it pretty refreshing how the leftist humor was done, making fun of certain over progressive people, such as destroying the Washington monuments because yes, they were slave owners, yes, they were racist. There's no two ways about that. The founding fathers were exceptionally racist, and they were slave owners. They were not good people by any stretch of the imagination that we would use in a modern sense. There would be no way we would consider these people good, and that by idolizing them, you are technically idolizing slave owners and other people. They also take shots at like things like owning a girl or getting the girl, treating girls as objects to be won, the damsel in distress sequence, girls just being the side pieces to these heroic figures. There are so many topics that are broached but aren't overly expounded upon. They're put out there as jokes that, hey, if you're leftist, if you're a decent human, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna phrase it like that, then you'll probably get a chuckle out of it. There's feminism jokes where one of the villains, again, is trying to topple slave owner monuments, and he says that the woman should be with him because of the the patriarchal society that has her dressing like a more promiscuous woman. And the woman claims that, hey, I designed my costume myself. You know, there's some funny moments in there. However, there are plenty of individuals who aren't nearly as left-leaning, who don't like any left-leaning ideology, or who simply are right-wing or alt-right or anything like that. In fact, you can see that this show has 11% 1 stars. And if you look, a majority of the people who are giving it 1 stars are giving it because they feel like it's too political, which is funny because the normal Justice League and most superhero comics in general are exceptionally political. It kind of feels like the people who didn't realize that Final Fantasy was about eco-terrorism and big government and various things of that nature, which are inherently political, and they just don't like the certain politics that are being discussed. The certain views and ideologies are being put in a good light while others are being put in a negative light, or that certain topics are being brought up which they personally disagree with. Now, I will say, I'm not going to necessarily ding these people or say that their views are necessarily invalid because of this, because I know that if a show was touting or talking about the SJWs that are ruining the world, or how feminism is the real problem in America, I would probably rate it 1 star too, depending on how it was done. Now, I don't think this show goes above and beyond or forces some sort of political agenda, as in leftism, down your throat, or some sort of social awareness down your throat. It's just making jokes that happen to be left-leaning. It's not a political commentary as far as expounding upon racial issues that we have today, but it is a good indicator of how our political and social climate is today. There is a gay best friend. It's not like overly shoved in your face that he is gay, but it is shown that he is gay through just normal conversation. It's not treated as something special. There is an African-American love interest that the ostensibly white maybe protagonist goes after. I'm not actually sure. His mom kind of looks maybe Asian. Look, the white appearing protagonist is going after a person of a different race with typically dark features that typically align with an African descent. There's my wokest take on that situation, which is something that we don't often see in media. But it's not played off as like this special thing. It's simply a thing. It is treated no different than any other love interest. This society isn't exactly a one-to-one of our society, but it is certainly going into a more progressive field, which is what America is doing. It is becoming more and more progressive. While we do have a lot more right-leaning people than we probably would like if you are on the left, there is an underlining current or moving to the left, and this show reflects that. I don't think any of these social situations should put a damper on it. If you're anyone of a decent, I don't know, conscience, of a decent understanding of the current climate, this animation, the show is art, and art often reflects the best of society or the worst. And right now it's showing a slightly better side of it by incorporating this, by including all these diverse characters. This isn't just a case of them making every single character black, or every single character Asian, or every single character white. There's whites, there's Asians, there's black, there's Africans, they're like actually from Africa. There is just this myriad of different people. There's lesbians, there's gay people, there's plenty of straight people. We haven't met a trans person, but I would be willing to bet that we probably might. I wouldn't be shocked, and I would think that is pretty fucking based, honestly. I think that this show is lefty, but I don't think it's lefty propaganda. And I think that if you are on the right, or if you're slightly more right, or you're alt-right even, or if you just don't like politics and you just want to grill for God's sake, that this show still has enough here for you to be interested in it. Overall, this is definitely a show that I think you should take a look at. Again, it's only up to episode 4, and I think they're doing weekly releases. One of the only other 1-star reviews I saw was that someone was just gonna automatically rate it 1 star, not because they didn't like the show, they actually really did enjoy it, but because it wasn't released all at once so that you can binge. Now, I don't really have a strong opinion of that. On one hand, I like the waiting. I like to be able to have something build up. I'd like to go back to it, watch it, and experience it with a group, and have that experience spread out throughout like the week, and have time to mellow in it, to have my thoughts solidify about it and truly absorb the content that I just saw, rather than speeding through, because you go from having a gourmet meal that you want to savor to having fast food, that quick dopamine rush, that instant gratification. It allows you to process the information a little bit more, and maybe you'll come away with a little bit more because of it, because you had to wait, because you had to spend time to really digest your food. But hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Now, I also want to give a huge shout out to all my patrons. You guys have been incredible. I know I haven't been doing videos like this for a while, and that's because I'm sorting out some stuff. I'm changing mocap seats for one, because I'm getting tired of paying like $2,000 to $4,000 for a suit I only use a couple of times. I'm getting back into my new workout routine. We're trying to go Ultra Instinct in 2021. It got sidelined because of it. I'm trying to get back into it. This virus has had your boy stuck in his house fucking forever, and we're finally getting to that, because I've just been not feeling great being trapped in here. So, you know, hopefully I have more energy, hopefully I'm feeling better now that the vaccine is rolling out, and I can go get that, and I can go back to the gym. That would be great. And obviously Moliminous Theater is actually going to be doing more content, more streaming content, more video content, more prepared content, so look out for that. I'm working with one of the artists, Techie. I wish I took the time to memorize her name, but she's an incredible artist, so I'll be tossing her quite a few bits to help me with a project. But that's all that's on the plate. I love your faces, so I hope you at least like my video, and I will see you in the next one.